France has gone to the polls for the second round of regional elections. The death toll has risen to 5 people as rescue efforts continue at collapsed Miami building. And Iraq, Egypt, and Jordan hold a cooperation agreement summit in Baghdad. Hello and welcome to teleSUR. I'm José Daniel López in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. The death toll has risen to 5 people as rescue efforts continue at collapsed Miami apartment building. Officials have reported that a fire at the collapsed building is hampering rescue efforts as authorities race to recover more victims suspected to be under the rubble. The rescuers are using infrared technology, water and foam to battle the blaze, whose source has not been established yet. Nearly 160 people are still missing after the collapse.
I know they're doing a lot, but I just wanted to pray for them and see if they can find more people alive. That's my hope.
The scores of people missing in the collapse of the beachfront condo building in Florida are no longer just a dry number, but have names and faces thanks to a makeshift memorial erected nearby. On a chain-link fence at a site serving as a staging ground for rescue teams and equipment, photos of some of the missing illustrate the desperation of their loved ones waiting for news after the sudden and still unexplained tragedy.
So my grandmother was in the building over here when it went down. She lived in the building, and when we arrived about 2:30 a.m. the night this happened, it was my father's mother, my grandmother, that was in the building, and my father happened to be walking and he found this, which was actually a birthday card for my grandmother. This has been going on for days, so quite honestly we don't know what to expect, but I can tell you that we're definitely very hopeful. We're holding on to faith, and we just believe that this is not over yet.
Minneapolis policeman Derek Chauvin has been sentenced to 22.5 years in prison for the murder of George Floyd in May 2020. Judge Peter Cahill's sentence underlined the officer's cruelty and abuse of his position of authority, aggravating factors that allow him to give a harsher sentence. During the arrest of George Floyd in May 2020, Chauvin suffocated his victim, pressing his knee against Floyd's neck, who several times shouted he was unable to breathe. The murder sparked nationwide anti-racist protests, prompting demands for structural reforms of police departments and laws. Chauvin's sentence was one of the longest given a former police officer for using illegal deadly force in the United States. Still in the United States, 5 people have died after a hot air balloon hit power lines and crashed into the ground in New Mexico. The balloon fell about 30 meters and crashed in the middle of a busy street, catching on fire. According to local authorities, 4 of them were pronounced dead at the scene, and the 5th person died after being taken to the hospital in critical conditions. No identities have been released, but fire officials say 3 men, including the pilot, and 2 females died. The Federal Aviation Administration and National Transportation Safety Board are still investigating the incident.
We know that we lost 5 community members today, and 4 of them were pronounced dead on the scene. 1 of them was transported to the hospital, and they were later pronounced that they had succumbed to their injuries.
In other news, France has gone to the polls for the second round of regional elections. The second round of France's regional elections has been marked by a low turnout. Results from the first round elections held last Sunday indicated a boost for the Socialist Party and traditional right-wing Republicans. Voters will be choosing the heads of France's 13 mainland regions, from Brittany in the northwest to the province Alpes-Côte d'Azur region in the southeast.
What isn't working? Unemployment. There are a lot of people unemployed. High unemployment. I work as a temp and I have a hard time finding a contract job. It's been 13 years. It's quite difficult, especially in the Ain region.
Thousands of people have turned the streets of Berlin, Germany into a rainbow colorful festival of fun to celebrate the 2021 Pride Month on Saturday. Encouraged by German Chancellor Angela Merkel's recent strong stance on UEFA's decision regarding LGBT publicity during the Euro 2020 football competition and the EU's determination to speak out about Hungary's new law on LGBT propaganda, people dance and cheer as they walk across the city. The Berlin Pride Parade was built as an alternative to the Berlin's annual Christopher Street Day Parade, which is being held in a cut-down format as a march on July 24th after being cancelled last year.
It's important for us to take to the streets to demand our rights. And of course, Hungary is unacceptable. So imagine if something like today was not even possible, because it's simply considered propaganda by Hungary.
Thousands of people also gathered in Rome and Milan to celebrate the annual Pride March. This year's motto was Pride and Ostentation. It comes after the Vatican formally opposed a proposed Italian legislation that seeks to expand anti-discrimination protection measures to people who are gay and transgender, along with women and people with disabilities.
Pride is always an exciting moment, a very important date and a very important political demonstration where we clearly claim equal respect, equal rights, and equal dignity as every other citizen of this country.
And hundreds of Mexicans took part in the Pride March in Mexico City to commemorate Pride Month and to ask for rights and protection for the LGBTQ community. Mexico's parade is one of the largest gay pride events in Latin America, attracting thousands of people each year. More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Zimbabwe has received 500,000 Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccines from China as the country continues its drive to inoculate about 10 million people. The country is set to receive an additional 2 million vaccines through Sinovac by next week. The vaccines came at a time when COVID-19 cases have been rising and vaccines have been running out in health facilities. More than 1.2 million people have so far received at least one of their jabs.
We've received 500,000 today. By end of next week, we'll receive another 2 million vaccines from Sinovac. 2 weeks after that, we want to bring in another 1.5 million vaccines from Sinopharm. And want to carry on so that by end of August, we bring in another 3.5 million vaccines again from China.
Peace talks between the Sudanese transitional government and a rebel group in the south of the country have stalled over disagreements on delegation of powers from the capital, Khartoum. The talks being held in Juba, South Sudan, between the government and the Popular Movement for the Liberation of Sudan North were postponed in mid-June due to the disagreements. The rebel group chief negotiator Amar Amon told the media that although many topics related to the economy, security, and politics were resolved, crucial issues like the delegation of powers between the central government and the regions were not agreed upon.
And also we agreed that major national issues should be decided through popular referendum as a principle also. In future, so we will never, as SPLM North, we will never integrate our forces, SPLM competence into rapid support forces. We want to see rapid support forces fate is decided before we go there.
Hundreds of people have protested in Mali's capital, Bamako, against the presence of French troops in their country. The demonstrators call for the withdrawal of French troops from their soil, rather calling for greater cooperation between Mali and Russia. France sent its troops to the Western African country to contain an Islamic extremist insurgency, which started in 2012. Germany also has hundreds of troops taking part in the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Mali.
We don't get why Mr. Emmanuel Macron imposes the presence of French troops on Malian soil. We don't see any Malian troops on French soil, nor African soldiers on European soil. That doesn't happen. That's it.
Thousands of followers of the Angolan president João Lourenço have rallied in the capital Luanda to show support to the government. The rally came on the same day when an anti-government protest had been postponed. Angolan opposition parties had organized a protest in which they threatened to march to the presidential palace to force President Lourenço out of power. The government supporters hailed the country's president for his work in implementing reforms, fighting corruption and nepotism.
First of all, I thank our president for everything he has done for us. I thank the Angolan society. I thank the people. I thank everyone, and I am happy. I want the president to repeat this over and over again. I want more years of life for him. I am very grateful, and I am speechless.
The COVID-19 Delta variant, which was first identified in India, has been discovered in South Africa. The country's Minister of Health has confirmed that the third wave of coronavirus infections in South Africa is being driven by the Delta variant. The minister warned that the country's current resurgence could be worse than the second wave. The Delta variant, first identified in India, accounts for almost all new infections in the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, South Africa, which is the continent's worst affected by the coronavirus, recorded 18,000 new COVID-19 infections and 215 deaths on Friday.
Our scientists, after their sequencing experiments, have discovered that we have a new variant that is prevalent in our country. This new variant is called a Delta. You know that it's not a new in terms of existing only in South Africa. It exists in other countries. So,
Rwandan President Paul Kagame has visited the Democratic Republic of Congo for a bilateral meeting with his counterpart Felix Tshisekedi. The two met at Rwanda's border town Rubavu and discussed the damage caused by the Nyiragongo volcano eruption, the security situation in eastern DRC, and different trade agreements. Both nations enjoy warm diplomatic relations and are looking forward to strengthen bilateral ties in trade, investment, and people-to-people exchanges. Rwanda and the DRC have recently witnessed an increase in cross-border trade.
We signed a number of agreements. I believe this is just the beginning. There are many areas that we are going to come to in which we can cooperate to build a solid relationship, but also basis for cooperation between our two countries.
Since I became president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have wasted so many years glaring at each other, living in tension, in a situation of war, in shared hatred. And now that is enough. It is time to experience the other side, the sharing of peace and love.
Tanzanian ambassador to China, Belwa Kairuki, has hailed the Chinese Communist Party for fostering development in China and other countries as the ruling party marks its 100-year anniversary. The African ambassador praised China for playing a leading role in technological development such as G5, which has been benefit not only in China but other countries. Tanzania is one of the African countries which have benefited immensely from trade cooperation with China.
100th anniversary is a milestone, a very important milestone to the Communist Party, but also to China as a whole. We have seen the effort to build the nation together. Now they are still in the frontiers in terms of building a community with a shared future through initiatives like Belt and Road. But also we have seen remarkable achievement in the area of science and technology. China is a leader in technologies like 5G, a leader on the Internet of Things.
The King of Jordan, Abdullah II, has arrived in Iraq's capital, Baghdad, for a summit between his country, Egypt, and Iraq. King Abdullah was received at the airport by Iraqi President Barham Salih, and the two held talks before being joined later in the day by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi. The summit is a follow-up of a cooperation agreement between the three countries launched in Cairo in March 2019. The leaders will discuss regional issues ranging from trade, security, and fighting insurgents. Residents of Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, have blamed the United States for recent clashes between the Taliban and the Afghan government forces. The residents say the U.S. is responsible for the escalating conflicts in Afghanistan, and its purpose was not to bring peace to their country. This comes a week after Afghanistan's former president, Hamid Karzai, said the United States has failed in its mission of bringing stability to the war-torn nation. The U.S. has already started withdrawing its forces from Afghanistan after 20 years of conflict.
All the Afghan people know that the United States is not here to bring peace. They are here to their political game. They are here to get close to the countries in this region to threaten them, such as China, Russia, or Iran, and try to get power in this region.
Several people have been arrested in Myanmar as protesters took to the streets again in the city of Yangon to oppose to the coup that overthrew an elected civilian government almost 5 months ago. Myanmar security forces dispersed the protesters who were carrying banners and were lighting fires in the streets. According to the independent group Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, at least 881 people have been killed by security forces since the February coup, and more than 6,000 people have been arrested. And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Colombians have started to use art to protest against President Iván Duque. Visual arts are being used to protest in the national strike, which was launched on April 28. Protesters are demanding President Iván Duque to stop violation of human rights and violence against demonstrators. The artists are also using sculptures to pay tribute to those fallen under police violence. The United Nations recently called on the Colombian government to launch an independent inquiry into the deaths of protesters in the city of Cali, where clashes with security forces have been most deadly. Salvatorian President Nayib Bukele has started a program to promote the use of Bitcoin. President Bukele announced that he was going to donate an equivalent of $30 in Bitcoins to every Salvadorian citizen to promote its use. However, he said the use of this cryptocurrency will not be mandatory. El Salvador's Legislative Assembly approved a law in June to make Bitcoin a legal tender in the country, making it the first nation to do so.
This will be the only Bitcoins that the person who does not want to receive Bitcoins will receive. Why? Because they will be given for free. When opening the app, they will receive the equivalent of 30 USD in Bitcoin. Remittances, the people who send them as well as the people who receive them, know that remittances have commissions. They pay high costs for sending and have several problems. In this case, with Bitcoins, these problems are eliminated.
The Chilean Congress has given authorities a green light to extend the state of emergency and reinforce other measures to reduce COVID-19 infections. In spite of their criticism of President Sebastián Piñera's handling of the pandemic, most opposition deputies and senators backed his request for an extension of the state of emergency. The emergency allows authorities to restrict civil liberties, impose curfews, quarantines, regulate distribution of essential goods and services, among others. Since February, Chile pioneered the massive vaccination of its population, but infection rates continue increasing. More than 32,000 people have died in Chile since the first case was detected in March 2020. 1 out of 4 Cubans have been vaccinated against COVID-19, with more than 5 million doses applied so far using the Abdallah jab. Health authorities in the country announced that so far 24% of the population has been immunized with at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. According to a study carried out by England's Oxford University, Cuba currently leads the percentage of people vaccinated in a day per 100 inhabitants. This is the result of an effective alliance between industry, research centers, and the public health system, the study says. Cuba has developed 5 vaccines, of which 2 have reached the 3rd and final stage of testing. One of them, called Abdala, has proven a 92% efficiency in preventing the disease.
We believe that Cuba will be the first country to be able to vaccinate its entire population by 2021 with its own vaccines. We will have to see what will happen with the efficacy of the sum of 2 doses of Soberana 02 and 1 dose of Soberana Plus, which is what we will present to our regulatory authority when we have this final data.
Meanwhile, Venezuela has received the first batch of the Abdala COVID-19 vaccine developed in Cuba. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez received the shipment, which is part of the agreement signed between Venezuela and Cuba for the development of 12 million doses of the Abdala vaccine against the coronavirus. This comes after the scientific community confirmed the vaccine candidate has shown an efficiency of more than 92%. Cuban ambassador to Venezuela, Dagoberto Rodriguez, stressed that the agreement is part of the close relations and solidarity between both nations.
And there is not the slightest doubt that in this significant act, where we are confirming the reception of the Cuban vaccine Abdala, Bolívar remains undefeated. In this triumph over those who try to oppress our people, over those who try to dominate us.
The arrival of the first batch of the Abdala vaccine is a sign of a close, brotherly relationship between our countries. With the arrival of this vaccine, the vial doesn't only carry a vaccine that can help to alleviate the pandemic, to save lives, but in each vial comes the sentiment of love and brotherhood of the Cuban people.
Russia has recorded its highest deadly COVID-19 death toll since the beginning of 2021. Russia has been experiencing a sharp spike in COVID-19 infections, where more than 21,000 new cases have been recorded in the past 24 hours. The country's National Coronavirus Task Force has reported that 619 people have died over the past day, which is the highest number since December. More than a third of the new infections across the country were registered in the Russian capital, Moscow.
For the last week, the number of patients has increased by 150, comparing to the numbers we had before. The tendency of the last day is that we don't see a disease.
India has recorded almost 50,000 new COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours. India is grappling to contain a highly transmissible new variant of COVID-19 known as the Delta Plus variant. Health experts say the variant could evade antibodies induced by previous infections or vaccines and cause strain. The Delta variant was first identified in India last year and is a major contributor to the country's second wave of infections that peaked in April-May. On the other hand, Spain has lifted its preventive measures to wear face masks in outdoor places. The decision comes after more than 400 days since the beginning of the pandemic and was put in place to control the spread of the coronavirus. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced the lifting of the nationwide measure, which had become increasingly unpopular as the summer months approached last week. Face masks continue to be obligatory outside if people cannot keep a 1.5 meters distance, and is compulsory in indoor places such as public transport and shops.
Que he salido del hotel y lo primero que he hecho ha sido tirar la mascarilla al aire.
The first thing I did when I left the hotel was throw the mask in the air, delighted and happy. I know we need to respect wearing masks indoors, but I'm very happy.
Pero muy feliz, de verdad encantada.
Yo, por ejemplo, vengo ahora de ponerme la segunda dosis de la vacuna.
I, for example, have just had my second dose of the vaccine. I know that I am protected, and the elderly are protected, the grandparents. But we can still be infected, so any safety measure is good and coherent.
Musical events have returned in South Korea as the country lifts most of its COVID-19 restrictions. Thousands of music fans attended a concert in capital Seoul as South Korea began easing restrictions on large concerts and sport events last week. The government also announced it was going to loosen some quarantine restrictions for fully vaccinated overseas visitors. Almost 12 million people have been vaccinated against COVID-19 in South Korea, which is about 23% of the country's population.
Although I am a bit worried, various tests, including using self-testing kits, are conducted before we enter, and people seem to be distancing themselves from each other. I expect things to be safe as long as we can follow these safety measures.
And we come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.